Hello, welcome back to Out on That Line podcast. I am Jeff with my co-host Alex as always. Alex, how you doing this week?
Jeff, we are bringing a wild and weird energy to this one this week because we are recording in daylight hours for potentially the first time. And I got to tell you, it really brings a whole new spirit to this enterprise. I'm excited. I just spewed seltzer all over my electronics. I'm that jacked up about this episode. How are you doing?
I am doing very well. Maybe not as well as your effervescent electronics are doing now.
Hmm.
But I think I don't know if we've done daylight episodes. If we have, it's been very rarely. I still use my lighting rigs just the same, just to make sure that the people out there know that we've got some damn continuity. We are professionals in this place. And we are going to be doing another review for you this week. And it's going to be from the south of Africa, South Africa to be precise, an artist by the name of Ecca Vandal and her album Looking for People to Unfollow. So very, very of the times kind of title that maybe people in 6 years will be like, what was this even in reference to? And we're going to talk about it this week, Alex. Ecca Vandal, for folks that aren't aware, is I guess the most similar artist I could maybe like compare her to that people may know more about is like MIA, in the fact that it's just like a very eclectic kind of version of music, but it's very punk focused. I think I don't know if she started as a punk artist or a rapper, definitely does a lot of both. And there is a lot of both on this album. It's just, I think this is an example of an artist that just does what she wants to do. This is the muse that she's chosen to have, is this kind of like very noisy punk rock in this very like, I don't even know what kind of like rap music I guess that's the part I would say is probably most similar to MIA, is very like international, this kind of like world music style of hip hop music. Now I had never listened to Ecca Vandal. I think I'd seen her mentioned a lot because I think she's played here in Austin quite a few times. There is a pretty like stout punk scene here in Austin. Another band called Die Spitz is locally from here, and I think they've done some like shows together and tours together. But I do think at this point Ecca Vandal has become a much bigger star, and I think is just about on the precipice of like really blowing up. Now I don't know what your thoughts on that are, like with the style of music that this is, if you think there's a ceiling for this style of kind of punk rock. But I'd be interested to hear how you heard about her.
Not so much a ceiling necessarily as like I do think it occupies a certain niche when you're talking about the mainstream, but not so much as like certain country artists that we cover or someone like, a Jordy Greep. Um, Someone like Jordy Greep would have a hard time, I think, breaking into the mainstream consciousness. Uh, Very similar artists, so I think it's an apt comparison because you were talking about how do you classify the kind of rap that Ecca Vandal's doing? How do you classify the sound at certain intervals on this album? The interesting thing is she's trained in jazz. She went to the Victorian College of Arts in Australia and studied jazz. And that was like her grand awakening to wanting to be a musician. And you certainly, I think, rhythmically in terms of like time signatures and switching things up and interesting syncopation, you hear that on this album. You don't really get something quite as jazzy as the new sound with Jordy Greep, or there are certain flashes of like Black MIDI, Black Country New Road, like that scene. I can't remember where they're all from. It's not Cardiff because that's Wales, but it's somewhere in England where they have these very specific accents and this very specific music scene that sprung out of it. And there's all this like the jazz influence, I think, shines through in some of the structuring, but you wouldn't categorize this as jazz rock, jazz punk, or anything like that. I think it's just kind of a flavorful backing to the rest of this. There are like metal vocals. So the one of the singles, "Cruising to Self Soothe," that was the first thing that I heard from Ecca Vandal, and just like this insane scream, and then sustaining that level of energy through the entire song. so like vocally she's doing like a lot of like metal and rock. There's some kind of sprekasang or like rap elements to it. It's a very ambitious and eclectic genre mix, and I love it for that. This is one of those sweet spots for me where it's like you're giving me a little tiny bit of everything,
Mhm.
and it's not clashy. It comes together perfectly to make something unique, but I would say accessible. So while like the mainstream might have a hard time tapping into this in terms of being attracted to it, I think once you're in, you stay.
I think that's a really good way to put it, because I think there were definitely parts of this album that I was much higher on. And I think the more jazzy influence things, so when you're talking about the kind of broken time signatures and things like that, that was where it sort of lost me a little bit. So it was a decent part of the first chunk of the album where I had a hard time the first time through, like, I guess, parsing things out. So I get the same struggles I had with Black MIDI, Black Country New Roads, like that kind of thing. It's like, to me, there is a certain level of like too much that I think it can reach for me. And it definitely were parts of this album that reached. But the thing is, there was so much to this album that there was still a lot that I found that I liked. And the more I listened to those, and I think really the first like 5 or 6 songs. So like Cruising to Self-Soothe, I think is a really good representation of telling people like what you're going to get on this album. But it was really the hip hop and rap elements that I loved. I thought they were absolutely excellent, and most of that was towards the back half of the album. But I think the idea that she was trying to throw so much at the wall and made it work as well as she did. Now, it might not be necessarily for me. I think there was a lot of points where I would kind of jump out of it, be like, that, like, it just didn't make enough sense to me as far as how those time signatures came together. The vocals, I think, were the part that carried all that through for me, because I am at my core a metalhead. And screaming vocals, like when it comes to like metal music, there is nothing heavy enough for me. And for me, that the vocals were really what carried that through, because I think a lot of the musicality was just too much. And I don't want to say it was like nonsense, because it makes it sound like it wasn't valid or anything like that, but that part wasn't for me. I think if you have a real background in like musical theory, and jazz, if you listen to a lot of jazz music and you also listen to punk, you're probably going to find a ton that you love about this album. I think Jordy Griep in the new sound was like right at the limit of what I like in that style. And I think it was perfect. I think it reached right up to the point that it was going to become too much for me, like too much to keep track of, like however you want to put it. But it didn't ever breach that. And so that's why, like, the new sound for me, I remember that was my album of the year that year. And this album, I think it just threw too much at me to try to make sense of in the first listen. It made a lot more sense as I got into it. And by the, third or fourth listen through the album, it really made a lot more sense. But it was because I had to kind of work at it. And I suppose that's the point. I think if you're interested in music that you have to like work at to understand, that you kind of become part of a club if you get it, this is the perfect genre of music for you. And especially if you're like looking for something that's not your standard like 3 chords and a lot of attitude punk music like Sex Pistols or like the Clash was at some points. Like, there's that style of punk music, and then there's this style of punk music where there was a lot of thrash elements to it, which I enjoyed. There was a lot of like the real screamy vocals, like The Refused. I don't know if folks are familiar with that. The Refused and the Shape of Punk to Come album is a landmark album, but I think a lot of people found it went too far. It went too much. I think if you're like a Turnstile fan, there's going to be a lot of like wow moments in this music that you'll appreciate, but it doesn't have that same kind of groove. So if you are looking for that kind of groove, which is what I really hunt for, you're not going to really find it on this album until you get to those like rap parts. And those I wouldn't even really say are that punk style. I think this is a tale of 2 parts of an album. And I kind of guessed that I was going to enjoy that second part more, and you were going to enjoy that first part more.
And I truthfully, I love the whole thing start to finish. I think it One of my like recent themes with albums on the show is it suffers from a little bit of sameness. Um, which is a kind of a weird thing to say about something that's doing so much, because for me it really is twofold. You have identity, like a lot of themes of identity, because she is born to Tamil parents from Sri Lanka, born in South Africa, raised in Australia,
Mhm.
schooled in Australia, again with this like technical jazz vocal background, and you can tell. And so when you're going to then make this explosive punk rock music, many of those artists are self-taught. I mean, how many stories have we heard about like, my uncle had this shitty old guitar and I could barely get it tuned, and I sat there in the garage and I played it until I played it till my fingers bled. And you kind of discover your sound. I mean, we're big Against Me guys, and that's kind of the story of Laura Jane Grace and like the other members of Against Me. Is I think when you come up through punk, you get your education. Nothing's axiomatic, but you tend to get your education from your forebears. It's the music you listen to that is really informing how you learn to play. Like, oh, I'm going to play guitar along with this song, and it's going to teach me exactly what I need to do, as opposed to a formal education for Ecca Vandal. And sometimes that shows, because the kind of explosive, little loose around the edges. You don't necessarily want to say improvisation. This cat is driving me nuts. You don't necessarily want to say improvisational, but something close to it. There's a sort of kind of there's a big DIY aspect and a little bit of a fly by the seat of your pants element that makes it exciting and it makes it feel transgressive. And I think those edges get sanded off here. So it's an explosive sound, but it is pretty structured based on her education, which doesn't make it bad. It's just, if you are a true punk and everything is about purity tests and authenticity and not selling out and all that, she probably wouldn't pass. But to a music lover who kind of revels in the eclecticism, I love it. So I think it's the combination of drawing upon these different cultural identities and drawing upon her musical training and taking all of her influences. Like, she lists Billie Holiday, Fugazi, and Bjork as like top 3 influences, along with like hip hop, hardcore punk, electronic music. And instead of being like, I have to pick one, she chose to blend it all here. So when you say it's something you have to work at, for me, it feels like something you really have to digest. There's so much. The kitchen sink is getting winged at your head, and if you aren't careful, it's gonna bean you. So for me, that's where I can see it getting difficult. And honestly, at first listen, like especially the first song on the album, good old what's its name here, Airplane Mode.
Mhm.
I was like, fuck, I really liked Bleach when it came out as a single. I really like Cruising to Self-Soothe. The mix feels weird on that. So I started to kind of sweat the production at first. I was like, I don't know about the mixing and mastering on this. She's way too forward in the mix. And then slowly you realize, like, nope, that was intentional. She's doing stuff, she's playing around. So it can be a hard album to take it all in and digest it, I think, at first glance, if you don't really know what to expect.
And I think that's where, because we've listened to Jordy Griep and because we've listened to Black Midi, and I would say even like 100 Gex, where it's just this really off the wall kind of style music that finds a way to come together, that finds a way to like make itself cohesive, even though nothing about it should be. And I think that's what's punk about this. And I think that is, if somebody's going to questioning how punk someone is, I think is one of the least punk things you can do. And it's funny that the definition of punk can be such a contradictory thing, because it's supposed to be a really accepting, like, if you want to be punk, anybody can be punk. It's about attitude, right? It's not a style of music. But the people that you hear the most about calling someone not punk are people that consider themselves punk. So it's just funny how there's always this like dueling force. And really, the only way that you truly can be punk is to not consider yourself to be that. And I think there is a lot of artists that you could call punk. It might not fit in that what you'd consider a genre of music, but you could call Jordy Griep punk, because what else have you heard like that before? And you could call this punk, because what else have you heard like this before? And I think I agree. Her being so forward in the mix, if I wasn't somebody that loved just like somebody that sounds like they're absolutely shredding their vocal cords, I would probably have a really hard time even having given this album a second listen. But because I love that part of it, I was like, okay, clearly there's a lot of passion here. And that's really what I think makes the greatest music. Is you can plan all you want. You can do all these things. You can have all the jazz background and jazz training and all this classical like learning that you've done. But if you can't make your voice come through all that, then it means nothing. Then you become Michael Bublé or Jennifer Hudson, or these people that are like undeniably, or I guess more closer to like this like world, like Youngblood, somebody that is undeniably talented but has absolutely nothing to say. And I think that is where you get an artist like Ecca Vandal, where it may not be your genre of music, but to say that this is not something, I don't want to get super hyperbolic here and call it like groundbreaking or anything like that. But in a world where there is so much stuff that is the same, that there is a certain like digestible version of everything that everybody wants to have, and you want to kind of capture the most people, get the most ears to listen to whatever it is, get the most mouths to eat whatever you're making. It's like there's a lot of effort to homogenize things, I guess, to really kind of boil it down. And when something is this off the wall, whether you like it or not, you almost have to give it credit, right? And I think if she had done just a whole album of the hip hop stuff, maybe I wouldn't have liked that as much as I did, knowing what she's capable of on the rest of it. And I think the fact that she does have, in very few moments, but you do hear that she has a really excellent just singing voice. Like if she had decided to just be like a Gracie Abrams type pop singer, she probably could have done that. She's got a great voice that can carry that style of music if she wanted to. She didn't want to. She wanted to make the music that she wanted to make. So she took that classical training, that knowledge of like how to make these instruments and these things make these sounds, and wrestle it into making the sounds that she wanted to. And for me, that is the most punk thing you can do. Like if you're going to define it, that is the definition. Whether you consider this punk music or not, like the idea of it, the execution of it is one of the most punk things that you can hear.
That, and I think the messaging is super punk. If we're gonna, like, not to limit this to punk or hardcore, but it's a politically charged album. I mean, confronting apathy and inequality and challenging power structures is all over this. She chooses to tackle issues of identity and, substance use. And again, like if you look at like all of the influences on this, like in the song Then There's One, it's trip hop, it's hip hop, it's also Bhangra. I think when you hear MIA, because MIA is also Tamil,
Mm-hmm.
it's Bhangra, I guess, is that specific world music sound that we're hearing. Those elements all come together, so it's like there's cultural identity through the music, there's political identity through the lyrics. Like I have notes here where it's like the drive of Fugazi, the melodic instincts of something like Bjork, there's swagger, there's theatricality. It's kind of created its own ecosystem with these textures and the production. Like, not to shit on Ryan Binghamton, but that production is pretty straightforward. Like you draw a line from start to finish. We're not really experimenting with where things are in the mix. Everything's pretty set and established. And then all over this album, there are just these like stylistic chances being taken. Genres are getting mashed up. Peanut butter and chocolate are finally together, like I like to say. And there's great messaging on it. And I think that, to me, this really kind of heralds Ecca Vandal as a voice that I would love to see get traction. She did Cruising to Self-Soothe on Kimmel. I will say, like, you can tell her live shows probably rule, but I was waiting for the wah, and she didn't really like nail the scream.
Mm-hmm.
Plus, it was like down half a step, which is like not necessarily a problem, but it's like anybody that saw that. So, like, people in the YouTube video comments were like, "Oh, she rocks," and I'm like, go listen to the fucking single, because I think as much as there are so many artists who sound so great live and like try to capture that energy because that's really the essence of them, I think she did a hell of a job as a studio musician. So take
Mm-hmm.
nothing away from how she probably is in concert, but she managed to capture that kind of energy in this studio composition. So for me, like, I hope people find this. I hope that other music journos will give this some shine, and I highly recommend people check it out. For me, this is a 9 out of 10.
That I think that's fair. I was almost sure you were going to give this one a 10. And for me, it's a 7 out of 10. I think just for what I was saying at the beginning, I love the idea of what she's doing more than I kind of liked what she was actually doing. I think again, it's not totally for me, but the idea that you can make something that sounds this off the wall, like that, the idea is for me. The music might not hit the mark for me, but it's not that it wasn't produced well enough or didn't have enough heart in it or anything. Clearly had plenty of all that. I think just how much was packed into each thing, and what I give a lot of credit to is the political slant of everything. Love that. I give a lot of credit to the variety of sounds that she pulled out on this album. But I think it lacked a little bit in cohesiveness. Not that she's required to do that, but that's where it kind of like chopped off a couple points for me, and we land at the 7 out of 10.
I think that's perfectly fair. I'm glad you enjoyed it. I'm glad we did it. It was definitely something that as soon as I heard Cruising to Self-Soothe was on my radar. And then like hearing Bleach after that, I'm like, well, these are very different. And that can be exciting about an album is are you going to get a lot of different stuff that works, or are you going to get a bunch of different stuff that's like a mixed bag? For me, there was a slight bit of overstuff, which is why I dock a point. And again, it's not like I can't endure length, but it just kind of felt like
That's what she said.
no comment. But yeah, it felt like if you clipped like 1 or 2 songs off,
Yeah.
you might have something a little tighter. But yeah, no, this is one if we were doing the old system, I would say buy it.
Yeah, I think pretty solid debut for Ecca Vandal. I'm sure she's very excited about getting such strong scores on her first appearance on Out on That Line podcast.
Yes, her second album overall, first in 9 years, but her debut on the pod.
First in 9 years. That's crazy. Well,
That
Alex,
crazy.
we mentioned a lot of other artists on this episode, and we have done episodes on a lot of those other artists, which is probably why we mentioned them. Where can folks find the episodes on those other artists?
Listen, as very influential music podcasters, we're kind of like God's paintbrush, which basically makes us God. So beat that. Beat that, Fantano. Beat that, Pitchfork. Beat that, you other fucking losers. There is nothing that they are doing that even comes close to what's happening at youtube.com/C/out on that line. Folks, we do things so differently that we don't even plug all this shit at the beginning like we probably should. Okay? Because we're trying to get you straight into the meat of the matter. We are trying to serve up a sirloin steak of entertainment, and we just want you to bite into it and shake like a, we want you to bark like a dog for us. Bark like a dog. Oh, careful now. Caddyshack. Do you get people doing those references? I don't think so. The only good varmint poontang is dead varmint poontang. I could go all night on the comedies of the 80s. Maybe we'll do an episode about the soundtrack to Caddyshack. There's a lot of interesting lore there. You don't know. You won't know unless you are subscribed to the channel and you turn notifications on by clicking the little bell and you give the video a thumbs up and you hype the video. And for the love of God, you leave a comment. The comments are the engine that drives this thing, okay? We thrive when we know exactly what's on your mind and when we know that we're meeting your needs and when we know what it is you want to hear. You can request stuff. You can request stuff and we will do it. You guys just for some reason are very timid about that and I don't know why. So I suggest you get over it because life is going to steamroll you. People are going to walk all over you for the rest of your life unless you learn to stand up for yourself and say, I want you to do the new Machine Gun Kelly when a new Machine Gun Kelly comes out. And you know what we're going to say? We're not doing that one. But anything else we'll probably consider, except for Morgan Wallen or Taylor Swift. But other than that, there's a pretty broad swath of things we will do at youtube.com/C/out on that line. Also on Spotify.
Yeah, don't forget to smash that like button, subscribe to the channel. Until next time.